Hi everyone, it's Debbie with Book and Bujo. Welcome if you're new, welcome back if you've been here before. Let's go over all of the September readathons that I participated in and see how many I actually finished. Let's start with the year-long readathon, so TBR trails. I was Team Azray. We actually won. It's going through like a little board game between the Azrays and the Centaurs, and the Azrays won, which was really cool. But we did still have some prompts. I did not get to the activity this time, but I did read all 4 prompts. So we had a book that will scare you, and for that I read Rebecca, which is in this little mashup. And that one is suspenseful, and there's gaslighting, and yeah, it's really fun. I love it. And so I did read that one. And then a book inspired by the Battlefield game board is part of TBR Trails. And that one, there were swords or like weapons. And so I chose weapons on the cover, and I read A Time of Dread by John Gwynne, and I did finish that. An indigo or dark blue cover, and I read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. Loved that. And then we had a free pick, and I read Reckoning by Michael R. Miller, the 4th book in the Songs of Chaos series. Highly recommend the series. So good. So good. Just the building of the characters and watching them grow throughout the series, and so good. There's a lot of action. There's dragons, dragon riders. So good. I also did Back to Book Trail, and that's with the Reading and Writing Life, and we get 3 prompts each month. And the first one was a challenge book. I chose a book off my 25 and 2025, and that was Empire of Silence by Christopher Racchio, and I did finish that one. A mood read, again, chose Reckoning by Michael R. Miller. And then I forgot to write down what the last prompt was. An ebook, maybe? I think it was an ebook. And I read Figment by Cameron Chase, the 2nd book in the Insanity series. So I did complete those. And then there was a Scientific September with Tasha's Library, and I got through all but one of my prompts. There was one I didn't get to, and there wasn't really anything else to swap it out for out of the books I read, so didn't quite make it all the way through the board. But the first prompt was a random letter generator, and I got an A, and so I read A Time of Dread by John Gwynne. Second one was a recommended book, definitely Empire of Silence by Christopher Racchio. That's the 1st book in the Sun Eater series, and it's definitely been recommended a lot. Third prompt, this is the one I didn't finish, and that was About Tech or Tech on the Cover. Oh, wait, no, I do have one. Yes, I did finish this one. So About Tech or Tech on the Cover, and I was going to read The Last Stand of the Golems by Joseph Graf, but I didn't get to it. But I did read Home is Where the Bodies Are, and that one has a VHS tape on the cover. Awesome. I'm very excited. So I did complete that one. Yay! And then Space Travel, and I read Death's End by Cixin Liu, and that is the 3rd and final book in the Remembrance of Earth's Past series. Such a good series. Sci-fi, oh, such a good series. And then we have Plants or Fungi on the cover, and for that one I did read The Moorland Cottage by Elizabeth Gaskell, and this one was kind of interesting. I did finish that one. And then I actually had 2 for this prompt, and I pretty much finished both of them, so I could really go with either. But originally I had is for time travel or time on the cover, and I chose Hooked by Emily McIntyre because it has a watch on the cover. And I could say I finished this one, but I finished it on October 1st, so I'm not going to count it. Close, but no. But I did read The Air Affair by Jasper Ford, and this one is full of time travel. Lots of talk of time travel, actual time travel, and I did finish that in September, so I switched it to that book. And then the last prompt was Astronomical Term in the title, and I read Gemina by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman, the 2nd book in the Illuminae files. So I did finish that. And then we move on to Everbloom Academy with Meg Reads. And I completed this one as well. I did have to swap some books from what I originally chose. And let's see, we had Fearless, Ferns, and Folklore. The basic prompt was a book featuring Fae. And for that, I read Eye of the Fates by A.R. Colbert, and I did like that one. It was good. It's nothing amazing, but it's a nice palate cleanser. It's just a nice, fun put on and just kind of chill out kind of book. And we had, for the advanced prompt, a book inspired by folklore tales. And for that one, I read The Scary Book of Fairy Tales by Tim Rayborn, and I did finish that one. I'm amazed at, between a lot of the different countries, how many of the same kind of similar tales there are. Now, it could just be word of mouth and, you know, they kind of took old stories and from other cultures and made them their own, or it's just we all have the same moral to the story type thing we want to learn and teach others, and so it kind of came up with similar stories. I thought it was kind of interesting. And then we had a geography of Everbloom 301, and that was A Submerged Cities, a book with a map featuring water. Now, originally I was going to read Dead Stars Part 1 by Ben Galley, but I did not get to it, and then I decided to push it to October for the Fabelin prompt where you get bonus points if you have star in the title, so I pushed that to October. So instead I read The Bone Witch by Rin Chipeko, and I did really enjoy that one, and I returned it to the library. But it did have a map that featured water. And then we had Fireflies and Fairy Tales. The basic prompt is a book that sparked your interest, and for this I read What If by Randall Munro. For advanced, a book featuring royalty, I read Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead, and that's the 4th book in the Vampire Academy series. Then we move to The Alchemy of Seasons. Basic prompt, a book set in the fall time, and I read Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shay Earnshaw, and that was cute. And then Let the Cauldron Pick Your TBR, or so a random generator, and this was for the advanced prompt for that same class, and I ended up with Empire of Silence by Christopher Rocchio, the 1st book in the Sun Eater series. And then History of Magic 301, The Rise of Magical Institutions, a book featuring academia, and I read Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead, because you could double up on these. Ancient Languages 301, Power of Ancient Scripts, a book released before 2015. I actually had quite a few. I did end up choosing Figment by Cameron Chase, the 2nd book in the Insanity series. And then we move to Cloud Watching. The basic prompt is a pale blue cover. That was super easy. Gemina by Jay Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. The advanced prompt is a book with a skyline, and I chose Halfway by Stephanie Void. That was cute. And then we go to Creatures of the Deep, a moss-colored cover. And for that, I chose The Moorland Cottage by Elizabeth Gaskell, because all of that foliage there is basically moss-colored, and I'm sure there's probably moss on the house somewhere. Okay, that was the basic prompt. And lastly, the advanced prompt, a book set at sea. That is halfway. It's not the entire book set at sea, but there are quite a few instances at the sea. And then we move on to the Cryptid Creatures Readathon. And for this one, I completed all but one prompt. There was only one prompt I didn't get to, and that was read a book based around weather. I couldn't figure out any of the books that I actually read that really kind of fit this. So, didn't quite get a blackout, but I did get everything else. For Blood Promise, Bigfoot, read a book over 400 pages. And then for Halfway by Stephanie Void, that was read a book, or Loch Ness Monster, read a book with water on the cover. For Reckoning, I did get to use that one twice, and I used it for Ahul, read a book with flight, because the dragons fly. I also used it for Rougarou, read a book with an animal on the cover. Oh, you know what? I can use Reckoning for a book based around weather. And then it's not necessarily based on weather, but some of the dragons control the weather. So I think that one works. And it's throughout the whole book where you have instances with that. There's like desert issues, there's desert setting, there's wind, there's ice storms. That's a possibility. And for the Moorland Cottage, I did use that for Jackalope, read a historical fiction. I also used it for Bunyip, which is read a book set near a swamp, bog, or marsh, and a moorland is considered a type of a swamp, bog, or marsh. For read a book with pirates, the Pharaoh's Mask, because they're not like seafaring pirates, but they are pirates as in they go and steal other people's stuff. So for the Pharaoh's Mask, we'll say I used it for Kraken, a book with pirates, as well as Mongolian Deathworm, read a book with a desert setting, because this takes place in the desert area of Egypt. And then we have Gemina, which I also used for 2 prompts. That was Chupacabra, read a multi-POV book, as well as Yeti, read a book with a cold setting, and that is because it's in space, which is cold. And then, oh, I know I had Reckoning for another one. Mbembe, read a book with dinosaurs or dragons. A Sorceress Comes to Call, I used that for Groot Slang, and that is read a hybrid genre, as well as Bloop, read a book with noise, because a call is a noise. And then we have, oh, I did have Blood Promise for one other, Jersey Devil, read a book with a family dynamic. Definitely. And that was it. That was such a fun readathon. So thank you for Sweet Tea Reads for putting this one together. It was so cute. I really hope next year you will bring this back and I will actually find some books based on the creatures as well. And then we move into Readathon Rebellion with Mel from Melanor Reads, and I did really well. I just missed 2 prompts. There was only 2 I didn't get colored in. And one of them I was just lazy and didn't do it. It was a non-reading prompt. I just didn't do it. And the other one, I just, I couldn't think of an embarrassing cover out of all of the books that I read. I mean, there's one that I would probably be embarrassed by if somebody knew what the book was about, but the cover is pretty benign, so I didn't get those 2. But I got all of the rest of the prompts. And I don't know if I'm going to go through, I mean, there's 40 prompts, so I don't know if you want me to really list off all 38 that I did, but yeah, I got all of them done, but that one. And I used 1 book per prompt. I didn't double up on anything. And then we move into SeasonAthon Academy with Completely Melanie. And this one I did complete all 5 required prompts, and I did 5 extra. I probably could have done more. If I probably could have tried to see if there was other books that fit into here that I read, but I didn't bother. I figured 10 was plenty. So I did read for English 2050, that is read a nonfiction book, and I did read The Fire Next Time. I do need to get my review posted though for all of these. And then I also completed English 2230, and that is read a book set in the UK, The Moorland Cottage. Foreign language of 4120, intermediate foreign language 4, read a translated book, and that is Death's End by Shishin Liu. And then we got to choose one of 4 for the 4th required book, and I chose English 3710, and that was Reading Like a Writer, a short fiction, read a short book, 250 pages or less. And for this, I read Wool by Hugh Howey, and it was part 1. So it was the first 56 pages pretty much of the book. And I did finish that. And then we had English 4720. So this is also an extra one from that same category. And that is a short story workshop, read a short story collection, and I read The Scary Book of Fairy Tales by Tim Rayborn. And then the 5th category for the required reads was the electives, and I chose Anthropology 2800, Underwater Archaeology, read a book with water on the cover, and I read Halfway by Stephanie Boyd. And then a couple of the other extras that I did was Biology 1050, and that was Life on Earth, read a book with nature on the cover. And for that, I read Blood for the Forest by Ben Galley. For Art 2830, a media art, read an adaptation. And for that, I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I think that's probably one I would be willing to read every year. And then lastly, Astronomy 1010, Introduction to Astronomy, read a sci-fi. And of course, Gemina by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. So this one, the prompts were super fun. I do still need to write a couple of reviews for these to totally complete the readathon, but I had a lot of fun reading all the books. And then we move into the magical readathon. I did switch around some books, so I did have some of my characters had the same prompts, and to make sure that my main 2 got their 2 callings, that this is their last year, to make sure that those were done, I did swap a couple books. So instead of Luminara reading it, I had Ariel read it, and so Luminara has to get a scroll to finish the other book. But I want to make sure my Ariel and Karasu got their 2 callings done that they've been working on for so long. And that is Master of Elements for Ariel. And she had to get a D in Elemental Studies. And she read for O is Water on the Cover, and she read Halfway by Stephanie Boyd. For Q, it was a romance, and she read The Pickup by Hannah Doyle. And for D, it was read 3. So basically read the first paragraph of 3 different books and then pick one. And she picked A Feast for Wolves by Ben Galley. For Shapeshifting, she had to get an O, and that was a genre blend, and she read A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher. And then for Animal Studies, read a debut book, and this is the one she swapped with Luminara, and she read The Air Affair by Jasper Ford. That was really cute. It was really fun. Very fast-paced and just a fun mystery. And then we have Astronomy O, Character with an Invisible Illness, and this one it was PTSD, and she read Monstrous Volume 1 by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. Restoration, she had to get an O, and that was a single POV, and she read Iron Keys by Ben Galley. And then lastly, for Q in Restoration, it was A Random Country, and she got the UK, and so of course she read The Moorland Cottage by Elizabeth Gaskell. She did complete Master of Elements, so excited. Now she can now move on to some other calling in April. And then she also was working on Feywild Cartography, and this is her final year for that one as well. She had to do an O in Elemental Studies, which of course we already went over, and then she had to do the O in Animal Studies as well. And then for Astronomy also, that was another double up. And Alchemy, for this one, read a book with the sun on the cover, and she read Empire of Silence by Christopher Racchio, first book in the Sun Eater series. For Inscription, she had to get a Q, and for O, a prime number of letters in the title, and she read Fangs by Sarah Anderson, and that was so cute. So cute. Just brought so much joy. Loved it. And then for the Q, a vertical spine title, and she read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. And then lastly, Demonology, and O, Emotion in the title, and she read The Scary Book of Fairy Tales by Tim Rayborn. So she completed both Master of Elements and Feywild Cartography. So she just started this one in April, so this is her second semester in Hearthkeeping, so Hearthkeeper. And she had to get a D in Alchemy for this one. And so an O, Sun on the Cover, Empire of Silence. And then for Q, the cover has your birth flower colors in it, which are white and yellow for Narcissa. And that is Chicago by Maureen Watkins. And then for an auto-buy author for D, that is The Weaver and the Worm by Ben Galley. And then lastly, Spells and Incantations, she had to get an O, and that was to roll a D6 and then read that number of pages that are in that page bracket. She rolled a 5, so that is 400 to 499 pages. And this one, she had to take out a scroll for this one. And she will be reading in October. Dead Stars Part 1 by Ben Galley, and this is the fourth book in the Emaneska series. And the guild book for Order of the Crescent, which is what Ariel is, was A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher, which of course she read for one of her prompts. And then we move to Karasu, and this is the other one. He's going to be a God Seer as well as a Scribe, and this is his graduating semester, so he will be done with both of those, and then he can move on to some other stuff. And between the two callings, he had to get a D in Inscription. For the O, that was a prime number of letters, and he read First Flight by Mary Robinette Cole. And then for an O, he had to read a book with a vertical spine title, and he read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And then lastly, for Q, he had to read An Animal on the Cover, and he read Lore Olympus Volume 1 by Rachel Smythe. And of course, Rebecca is Daphne du Maurier. And then he had to get a Q in Restoration, and the O was a single POV, and he read Blood for the Forest by Ben Galley. And for Q, A Random Country, and he got the Philippines, and he read The Bone Witch by Rin Chapeko, the first book in the Bone Witch series. For Elemental Studies, he had to get an O, and that was Water on the Cover, and he did finish Hooked. It was a day late, but he finished. By Emily McIntyre, and that's the first book in the Never After series. And then for Lore, he did have to get a Q. For O, he had to read a translated book, and that's Death's End by Shishin Liu. And then for Letters or Notes on the Cover, he just finishing today, again a little late, but My Choice by Brandy Blackman. And then for D, it's 2 or more M's in the title, and he read Flirting with My Billionaire Enemy by Cindy Ray Hale, the second book in the Blue Mountain Billionaires series. And then for Conjuration, he had to get a Q, and the O is a circle on the cover, and he read The Eye of the Fates by A.R. Colbert. And then for Q, Borrow from Another's TBR, he read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. And then lastly, an O in Demonology, Emotions in the title, he read of Time of Dread by John Gwynne. So he did finish both Godseer and Scribe. Now he was also working on All the Excavationist. This will be his second year for that one. And his group book was Babel by R.F. Kuang, and he had already read that, so he decided not to reread it. But for All the Excavationist, he needed to get a D in Animal Studies, and for O, read a debut, and he read The River Has Roots by Amal El Motar, and that was actually the group book for The House of the Arcane. But Karasu decided he wanted to read it. And then for Q, a sequel, Figment by Cameron Chase, the second book in the Insanity series. And then for D, he had to take out a scroll to finish this one in October, and that was last in the series, and he plans on reading Heart of the Fates by A.R. Colbert. And then Restoration, we already went over those with the other callings. And then Art of Illusion, an O, autumnal setting, Long Live the Pumpkin Queen by Shay Earnshaw, the first book in the series. And Spells and Incantations, also an O. And that was roll a d6, and he rolled a 1, so a book from 0 to 99 pages. And he read Necromancer by Lish McBride, and that was 77 pages. And he did finish that. And then lastly, I had to get a Q in Inscription, which he did finish, and that was an O, prime number of letters in the title, First Flight again, and then vertical spine title again, Rebecca. He did finish the 2 callings he needed to do, and he kind of got in just under the radar with both of those. And then we have Luminara, who is going for an Archmage, an Alchemist, which is her main goal, and Moon Warden. And she did pretty good. So for Alchemy, she had to get a D, and that is to read a book with a sun on the cover, and she planned on reading The 10 Incarnations of Rebellion, and this is by Vaishnavi Patel, and she did not get to that yet. So she is taking out a couple scrolls to finish some of these. She may want to look into just getting a scroll. I think there's a scroll where you can double up on books, and there's also another one that you can just pretend you did the prompt and still count it without reading anything. She may do that. Between her and Castien will more likely do that last one because he's my slacker boy. And then for Q, cover is your birth flower colors, and that is Love and Friendship by Jane Austen. And then D, auto by author, No Fairy Tale by Ben Galley. So she did read Love and Friendship, but she couldn't submit anything for that one yet because you have to submit the first book, the O, first. So she's basically do some holiday time school to catch up. And then Inscription, she also had to get a D, and that was prime number of letters in the title. She read Eros Philia Agape by Rachel Swirsky. For vertical spine title, she is currently reading Death Note by Tsugumi Oba, and not quite done with it, but she did get it started. And then Animal on the cover, Opposites Attract by Camille Isley. She still needs to start, so she's not off to a good start here. I mean, she's got a lot of classes, though. I mean, she did good for how many she has. Okay, and then we have Artificery, and that was just an O, and it's the 9th book you see when you scroll on social media. And that ended up being The Enchanted Greenhouse by Sarah Beth Durst, and she did finish that one. And then Spells and Incantations, she had to get a Q, and for O, roll a D6, and she rolled a 2, so that means a book from 100 to 199 pages, and she read Indian Fairy Tales, and that is by Joseph Jacobs. And then for Q, released this year, she read Reckoning by Michael R. Miller, the 4th book in the Songs of Chaos series. Animal Studies, this is an O. She still does need to read The Moon Dwellers by David Estes, and that's the 1st book in the series. And then for Astronomy, she does need to get a Q, and the first was Characters with an Invisible Illness, and she read The Sandman, Volume 2 by Neil Gaiman, and that had OCD, delirium, and encephalitis lethargica. And then for Q, a genre you don't typically read, and that was What If, because I don't typically read a lot of nonfiction, and that is by Randall Munro. And then Restoration, she also needed to get a Q, and the O is a single POV. She still needs to read The Hawthorne Legacy, the second book in the Inheritance game series, and that is by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. And then for Q, a random country generator, she did get Japan, and she read Witch Hat Atelier Volume 1 by Kamomi Shirahama. And again, she can't submit that one until she finishes The Hawthorne Legacy, so she's got to get going on that. Next was an O in Demonology, and that was Emotions in the title, and she read Loath to Love You by Allie Hazelwood. And then a Q in Lore. The O is a translated book, and she read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. And for Q, Letter or Notes on the Cover or in the book, and that was Gemina by J. Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. And then lastly, she had to get an O in Elemental Studies, and that was Water on the Cover, and she plans on reading Blood Will Tell by Samantha Young. So she didn't quite finish any of her callings, so she needed to get going. Yeah. And then lastly, we have Castien. He's in the Mindwalker Guild, and he's going for Dreamwalker, Mindmender, and Bard. He plans on trying to sing people to sleep and then help mend their minds while they dream. And we'll start with Alchemy. He had to get an O, and that was a sun on the cover, and he plans on reading Of Sages and Saints by Alexander Gabriel Zadero, but he has not read that one yet, so he's got to get a scroll for that one way or the other, whether it's postponement scroll or a skip scroll. And then we have Art of Illusion, and that is a Q. And for O, Autumnal Setting, he read Positively Poisonous, and that is by Melissa Erin Jackson, the first book in the Witch of Edge Hill series. And for Q, Tech on the Cover, he still needs to read this one, and that was The Last Stand of the Golems, and that's by Joseph Graff. And then we move into Spells and Incantations, and he does need to get a Q for this one. For the O is the roll of the D6, and he rolled a 4, so 300 to 399 pages, and he read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. For the Q, a book released this year, he still needs to read, and that's The Story of Oog by Len Vlahos, but that is on the October TBR. And then he needs to get a D in Lore, and O is a translated book. He read Ragna Crimson, and that's by Daiki Kobayashi. And then for Q, Letter or Notes on the Cover or in the book, he read Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands by Heather Fawcett, the second book in the Emily Wilde series. And then for D, he still needs to do this one, and that's 2 or more M's in the title, and he wants to read Hummingbird by T.C. Parker. And then we move into Psionics and Divination, and he does need a D for that one. For O, it's a genre spin, and he got Steampunk, and he read The Pharaoh's Mask by Christopher Tubbs, and that was really good. For Q, a TV or movie adaptation, he read Mary Poppins Comes Back by P.L. Travers. And then for D, Theme from a Recent Dream, and I had this weird dream. I did end up with a broken arm in the dream. It was a weird dream. Yeah, but I read Home is Where the Bodies Are, and that's by Geneva Rose, and one of the characters does have a broken arm throughout the book. So there we go. And then lastly, he has Restoration, and that's a Q. So for O, a single POV, he read Blood Promise by Rochelle Mead. And then for Random Country, he did get Dominica, and he plans on reading, still hasn't read it yet, but plans on reading Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rees. So that is all of the September readathons. I did fairly well, better than I thought for some of them, but not as good as I wanted to for the Magical Readathon. But I mean, I read a lot of books. I just ran out of time. And a huge thank you to everyone who joined my sprints in September, because you really helped me to get through a lot of these books. I had a couple of different sprints, and yeah, definitely helped with that, as well as helped me get through some of my crafts as well. I got through another section of my crochet dragon, so that was cool. And I will keep you updated in October to let you know how my Magical Readathons characters do on their scroll extensions for trying to get all the books finished in October, because I have a lot of readathons in October too. But it's going to be a lot of fun. And let me know which of these readathons you participated in and how you did. Hopefully you got at least one book read for everything. And if you made it this far in the video, let's leave a moon emoji in the comments to let me know that you are here for Castien's Calling of Moon Warden. And until next time, Keep reading. Bye!